This video is about creepy experiences with stalking. Please subscribe to our channel if you haven't done it yet. And also like this video now. LWTS, begin the stories. Stalker stories. Story 1. My boyfriend is a trucker, and I went trucking with him for 2 months. One night we decided to stay at his company's terminal. Life on the road is hard, especially if you're a feminine woman like myself, so I took advantage of the terminal's free showers that night. As my boyfriend slept, I went to take a shower and heat up some ramen in their lounge. When I arrived, there were many different people there. I showered, finished up, and then went to the lounge for my dinner. As I waited for my ramen to cook, I noticed a man and his friend staring at me. I didn't make eye contact with anyone. I just scanned the room, watched TV, and then focused on the microwave. Still, they kept staring. I sat at a table in front of them with another table between us. I ate my ramen and sat on my phone, occasionally looking up. Most of the people in the lounge were men, but I saw at least 2 other women. At one point, I heard a crunching noise next to me and looked up to see the man's friend offering me tortilla chips with my soup. I politely declined. Not only do tortilla chips not go with ramen, but why would I accept open food from a complete stranger? I was so focused on my phone that I didn't check my surroundings, and time flew by. I had already been there for an hour. I began to gather my things, and then I realized I was alone, except for the same man still staring at me. I was freaked out, and nothing usually scares me. I didn't know whether to stay in the lounge or hurry back to my boyfriend's truck. I decided to leave, and as I got up, the man also got up, still staring. I walked towards where we were parked and felt a wave of relief when I saw another trucker walking toward the lounge, along with an employee. The creepers ended up walking ahead of me, but then turned around, supposedly to throw something out. I ran back to my boyfriend's truck and double-checked that the doors were locked. Did that man think I was a lot lizard? Story 2. Back in 1996, I was attending a driver's education class. I didn't know at the time, but after being dropped off by my stepmother, the class had been canceled. By the time I made it back out to the street, my stepmother had already left. I knew then I would be stuck walking home. It was probably about a 3 to 4 mile walk, so I began heading that way. I was probably half a block down the street from the driver's ed class when I noticed a brown Dodge Caravan slowing down as it was heading towards me. I wouldn't normally have paid attention to anyone slowing down or driving past, but this van looked like one a friend's parents owned. For a moment, I thought I would be spared from the long walk home, especially since it was beginning to sprinkle. Immediately, I realized that this was not the case. The person in the van was a man, and he was smiling at me in a very uncomfortable way. I was only 16, so I wasn't totally sure what his look meant, only that it struck fear in me, and I began to walk faster. He kept driving, and I figured that was the end of it. After only a few moments, I began hearing someone approach from my left in a vehicle. They were going kind of fast. I'd been walking next to a large, open, empty parking lot, so I figured it was someone speeding around just for the hell of it. I noticed, though, in my peripheral vision, that the vehicle had begun slowly pacing alongside me as I walked. I looked to the left to see that it was that same man again. He had apparently made a right at the light and made his way back into the parking lot to follow me. Once he made eye contact with me, he stopped the van, jumped out, and ran around to open the sliding door. Then he started heading for me, so I turned and bolted back up the street towards the driver's ed class. I heard him running too, but then he stopped, and I knew he was heading back towards his van. Fortunately, I made it to the corner in time to catch the green light, and I ran as fast as I could across the street and straight into a McDonald's. I knew he wouldn't be able to just come in and snatch me like a child. I'm fairly strong, so the guy looked to be maybe my height, and I gave myself a moment to breathe. I saw him pull into the parking lot, and then I went over to the payphone, called my house, and hoped my stepmom would be home already. There was no answer, so I hung up and just stood there, starting to seriously panic. Only about 30 seconds passed after I hung up the phone when I glanced up to see another man staring at me. He was at the counter holding a tray full of breakfast food. Once he caught my eye, he seemed to make some sort of decision and then approached me. He said, "You look very scared right now. Do you need help?" I told him that a man was following me and I didn't know what to do. He told me, "I promise you, I will not hurt you. I only want to help you. I can take you home." At that point, I was so terrified and confused, I said, "Screw it," and took the risk. I had no idea what else to do in that moment. He took me home with no incident. He only asked me for directions once we got to my house. Then he said, "Can I ask you for one thing in exchange?" Immediately, I got afraid again. I thought he was going to make me do something. I just wanted out of the car, but then I told him, "Oh, okay." He said, "I'm a Jehovah's Witness. All that I ask is, if one of us comes to your door in the future, please don't slam it." I told him, "Okay." I thanked him profusely and then bolted from the car into my house. I'm not a religious person. I never have been. But as a result of his kindness, I never slammed the door in anyone's face that came to it, no matter their religion. I let them talk for a bit, explain my personal stance on religion, and then usually tell them an edited version of this incident. They always leave happy, so I guess that's all that really matters. Story 3. For some context, I live in a major city and currently don't do a lot of driving due to ongoing issues with my car. Plus, the pandemic has made me rely more on delivery apps in general. The other day, around 1 p.m., I decided to order some lunch after doing a lot of cleaning. I placed the Uber Eats order and found something to watch while I waited for my food. Within a few minutes, a driver accepted the order. I noticed right away that the driver, Anthony, was on a bike, didn't have a profile picture, and had no deliveries on record. At first, I wasn't alarmed. I was almost amused, like, "Oh wow, guess I'm this person's first customer ever." The full 30 minutes passed with no driver movement on the app. At this point, I thought maybe something was glitching out, or the driver was stuck. I contacted support via the chat option, and they ended up assigning a new driver because they couldn't reach the first one. Odd, but whatever. Now this is when it starts getting a little weirder. The new driver assigned was in the exact same spot as the original driver, and was also on a bike with no profile picture or prior deliveries. This driver's name was Laurie, I let another 20 minutes pass with no driver movement before messaging again to ask if there were any issues with my order. The app showed that the driver saw the message, but I didn't get a response. At this point, I checked to see if Uber Eats was experiencing any issues. While I was definitely weirded out, I was mostly just hungry. I contacted support again to request assistance. They reassigned the driver once more and apologized for the inconvenience. Finally, the third driver assigned was the exact same scenario, same spot, on a bike, no profile picture, no prior deliveries. This time the driver's name was Robert. Before I could even react or go about canceling the order, tired of dealing with this, he suddenly marked my food as picked up and immediately messaged me saying, "Hello, I have your food. What's your phone number?" I responded right away, saying, "I'm not super comfortable giving you my phone number. You can just message me on here." He responded again with, "What's your number? Be there in 10. How old are you?" At this point, alarm bells were going off. I contacted support immediately to have the order canceled and get further assistance. I was connected to Uber's safety team, who informed me that the order was canceled, I'd be refunded, and I should start documenting these strange interactions. As I was giving the woman on the phone the details, I started calming down, thinking it was just some creep or something. That's when I heard a man's voice at my front door. "Miss, Metal Gear 4269, I have your food." I can't even describe the chill that went down my spine. The way he said it was incredibly unsettling. Making things even worse, the Uber safety woman on the phone heard him as well and said, "Is that him? We canceled the order." I poked my head around the door. The main door was heavy but open, while the metal screen door was closed and locked, allowing us to see each other. I got a good look at him. When he saw me on the phone, he went from smiling to looking furious. He suddenly got right up against the door and kept asking who I was on the phone with. At this point, I started asking him to leave because he was making me uncomfortable. He got more and more angry, started pounding on my door, grabbing the doorknob, and shouting to be let in. The woman on the phone was asking if I was okay. The man kept shouting, so I hurriedly closed the heavy door and locked it. The man became borderline belligerent, kicking my door. The woman on the phone told me to call the police. He eventually walked away from my house after a minute and backed up to the sidewalk. For a moment, I thought he was going to leave, so I finished my conversation with the Uber safety lady so she could submit a report. Once she submitted it, I called the police and told them what happened. They told me if he came back to call again, and they'd send an officer. I did end up calling them again and gave a full report and description of the man. He didn't leave the neighborhood right away. A neighbor told me she saw the man I described walk back from my house to the sidewalk and hop into a truck with another man in the passenger seat. They just sat there staring at people walking by, being incredibly sketchy. My neighbor walked back toward my house to ask what happened. She was able to give the police a description of the vehicle and the other man. This was a very bizarre and uncomfortable experience that left me shaken. I wanted to share it to see if anyone else has experienced something like this. For now, I'll be avoiding delivery apps. To the strange Uber Eats driver who asked me for personal info and then tried to break into my home, please, let's not meet again. Story 4. My name is Victor, and I'm 23 years old. I have a story that happened to me when I was 17 years old. I work as a carpenter at a local building company, and this happened when I was a trainee for the same company. We were renovating a very old apartment building from around the 1960s that was going to be school classrooms for a school that had bought the building. As many carpenters do, we were working on Fridays, which basically meant starting earlier during the rest of the week so we could go home early on Fridays. This meant a lot of very early mornings. One day, I was on my way to work at about 4:30 in the morning. I was walking the usual way to my bus, which was about 1 kilometer. It took me through the block I was living on, and then through a small path in the forest about 200 meters long. By this time in the morning, it was still pitch black because it was winter, and I live in Sweden. The path through the forest was like a black hole, so I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, an old iPhone 4's. I began walking the small path. About halfway down, I heard a crackling noise from my right and flashed my light in that direction, but saw nothing. I just figured it was an animal or something. At the end of the path, I heard the crackling noise again, but this time it was much closer. I had always been a little paranoid in the dark, but was trying to get over it. Still, I began walking a little faster, keeping an eye behind me the whole time. When I arrived at the bus station, I sat down waiting for the bus, telling myself I was a coward for being so paranoid about a small sound I heard. I could see the forest I walked through from the bus station because it was only about 50 meters away. When I looked at the path, I saw a man standing behind a tree right under a street light about 10 meters to the right of the path. He was clearly watching me. He was wearing black pants and an old light blue, almost pastel-colored jacket, like it was from the 80s. I felt a bit sick when I realized he was watching me, even though it was only for about 20 seconds before I saw the bus arriving from around the corner. I immediately felt relief when I saw the bus, so I stepped on it. As usual, it was completely empty. I sat at the back of the bus and looked back at the forest to see if the man was still there, but he wasn't. When the bus began to take off, I heard a thud right beside my window. I quickly looked to the side and saw an arm reaching up to my window waving at me. The arm was wearing a light blue jacket. I didn't have time to see his face because he was wearing a hood, and the bus had already taken off. On the way downtown, I tried not to think about the man, but it was hard because it was so weird, and nothing like that had ever happened to me before. I eventually got off the bus at my stop and began walking to the building where I kept my work clothes and gear. It was really close to my bus stop, so it only took me about 5 minutes to walk there. When I arrived at the door to the building, I grabbed my key and was about to put it in the keyhole when I saw, out of the corner of my eye, the man in the light blue jacket peeking out from the building's corner and looking at me. I quickly unlocked the door, ran inside, and locked it behind me. After that, there were 2 more doors, both needing an access card, so nobody without the card could get inside. After the first door, there was a long hallway to the left, only lit up by a few lights in the ceiling. In front of me was the second door that led to my locker and the coffee room. I ran as fast as I could, shaking the whole time. There was no way I could think of how he got down here so fast. I put on some coffee and changed into my work clothes. It was completely quiet in the room, and it felt like hours before my co-workers showed up. When they finally arrived, I felt the best sense of relief in a long time. When it was time to start working, we walked toward the elevator that led up to the top floor where we were currently working. When we arrived at the top floor, I realized I had forgotten my helmet in the locker. I took the elevator down, went through the 2 doors, got my helmet, and was making my way back up. When I opened the first door and was standing in the dark hallway, I froze. I heard someone whispering my name from the back of the hallway. I looked down the hallway and saw the same man in the same light blue jacket standing there looking at me. Then he said something I will never forget. "You look so peaceful when you sleep, Victor," he said in a deeply shaking voice. I felt my whole world shatter when he said that. Then I ran for it. I opened the door and slammed it behind me. I ran to the elevator and smashed the button to the top floor. It felt like I was going up 100 floors before I reached the top. I ran to the others and told them what had happened. They just laughed at me and thought I was being silly, saying nobody could get in there without a card. I planned to call the police, but didn't for some reason. Probably because I didn't want to look like a coward in front of the others. Eventually, I never saw that man again. I don't know if I was hallucinating or if he was really there, but I never walked the same path to my bus again. Even to this day, I always sleep with my curtains down.